others with whom I've had the privilege of working over the years. We've heard two very interesting and very relevant sets of comments made by both Manoj ji and Kharola ji. Almost everything they said, I can easily agree with. Therefore, I'm going to put my case before you somewhat differently. And I want to make 2 or 3 general comments, and then I come back to what I think is the state of play and where we go from here. The first point I wish to make is that we have changed, or rather we have succeeded in changing the methods, the approach to issues relating to urban transport. Clearly, urbanization poses challenges. Prior to 2014, it is my case that those challenges were there, they were growing, but somehow we were either in denial or we chose to address them at our own pace. Following 2014 and the Honorable Prime Minister assuming responsibility at the center, he embraced urbanization as an opportunity. And our friends in the West, many of them who are here today, with whom we are very happy to collaborate on issues of technology, not only the West, other parts of the world, on technology, on issues of everything that urban transport requires in terms of conceptualization, bringing concrete plans, implementing them, etc. I think we've changed our approach, and I was talking to the secretary and I asked him for some basic statistics, and both of us, I think, went through those. Our first attempt at what could be the beginnings of urban transport in terms of metro started in the city of Calcutta or Kolkata in 1972. It took them all the time till 1984 just to construct 4 kilometers. The total 16 kilometers were completed in 1995. And the last 5 or 6 kilometers, I think, were completed towards the end of last year. That's December 22. So just please calculate, we started in 1972. That's 28 years till 2000, and you added another 22 years full. It took us 50 years to complete a total part rail, part metro system of 45 kilometers. And the ridership there is only 7 lakhs a day, 700,000 a day. Contrast that to what we are doing now. On an average, from the time of start to completion running, it takes us now what, 4 years plus, 4 to 5 years to complete a process of installing an urban metro system in one city. The 895 kilometers that we have operational today in 20 cities or so will rise to 27 kilometers in another few years, 2 years or so. And by that time, we will have the world's second largest metro system. I don't cite these figures with any purpose because I have been, as in my previous profession and even earlier, I've lived in cities which had metro systems, tram systems, metro systems. I think those cities have done very well, and they probably don't need to add. Whereas we started late, we've had the benefit of using technologies which were already available and developing on those technologies, getting new technologies. Today we are in the happy situation of already beginning to conceptualize the next phase of our urban transport ecosystem. One of those has been commented on extensively by both Secretary Manoj Joshi ji and Pradeep Kharola ji. By the way, I want to tell you, I had the privilege of having him as a colleague. And when he came from, after running buses and metros in Bangalore, then he joined us as CMD of Air India. That is when I was Civil Aviation Minister for some time. Then he joined me as Civil Aviation Secretary. And I think so he's got experience of what buses, metro, and civil aviation. And now he's converting all that into conference tourism in terms of the ITPO which he's heading. Now, I want to make a general point, which is the problem of last mile connectivity that both of them have touched on extensively. I tend to share the urgency that they talk about, which they mention, but I'm a little more relaxed when it comes to what I see happening. And mine is a very basic thing. First of all, our cities are growing very fast. The phenomena of urbanization is taking place at a pace which is mind-boggling. And therefore, we have to plan on a much larger scale. Therefore, transportation within cities, you will have something like 895 plus another 960 kilometers with as conceptualized presently in 27 cities. Then you will have connectivity between cities in terms of Rapid X or RRTS, etc. And we've got onto a good beginning there. And you have railways, Vande Bharat, etc. When you come inside cities, yes, I share the urgency because against the backdrop of the fact that most of our urban transport, especially in the smaller cities, is in the unorganized private sector, which by itself is not a bad thing to have the private sector unorganized. But I don't think it is geared to meeting the kind of demand that is going to arise. We have currently in the organized sector buses only about 40,000 in our cities. Anyone looking at that figure should be rightly worried because you need a minimum of 120 to 150,000. But I believe that beginning has been made. We earlier had taken 9 of the bigger cities under FAME 1 and FAME 2 to get proper, sustainable, green mobility there. Now we are taking the rest of the cities, and I have no doubt that the manner in which the e-bus Yojana has been conceptualized with the first 10,000, I think that will lead to it is the start of a process which will lead to many more follow-up schemes for e-buses. Of course, we have to take some very important and difficult decisions. It is very easy and more easy and to implement if you don't insist on e-buses and you bring in the fossil fuel buses. But I think we have tried to take the more difficult decisions. You will have to make provisions to have this form of mobility succeed in terms of the viability quotient for the smaller cities, because it's not going to be easy by itself. And given the climatic and other reasons, you will have to also ensure that this new attempt does not result in people saying, let's go back to diesel buses, let's do this, let's do that. I mean, there has to be a transition. But I can tell you with the experience I have in both the ministries that I'm associated with, currently Housing, Urban Affairs, and Petroleum and Natural Gas, that if you forget about what's happening in India, what happens in these two sectors, urban affairs in terms of how the urban economy is growing, its contribution to the national GDP, the shift to green technologies for construction, and a host of other things, these give you a pretty good idea of how a country is faring. Equally, if you look at the energy consumption, the mix, and the direction in which you are going, it gives you a very good idea of how the economy is doing. And I think on both those counts, we can be really proud of what we have succeeded in doing. And let me give you some startling figures. One of them already, I think Pradeep ji mentioned, we have 1 crore passengers riding the metro system every day in India. I see that increasing on a number of accounts. I mean, you may not add substantially more than the 1,000 kilometers under construction. But what you will do is, when you ease the last mile connectivity and when you bring in the other factors, you will find that the exercise of choice, what it ultimately depends. Why would you want to take out your two-wheeler or three-wheeler or any personal mode of transport if you have a public transport system which is well developed? Today, I don't know whether most of you are familiar, about 60 million, 6 crore people go to the retail point every day to fill gasoline, to diesel, petrol, whatever. 60 million people in a day, if you look at that in global terms, is an astronomical figure. But here again, the news is very good. Up to about 2014, the biofuel mixing that we were able to do in the fuel that we were retailing, after many attempts, we had a very modest target of 5% in 10 of our cities and union territories, and yet we were able to do only 1.4% biofuel blending. In 2014, when the Prime Minister assumed responsibility, we set ourselves a target of 10% blending by November 2022. And the good news is we did it 5 months in advance. Today we have a target of 20% blending, which has been moved forward by 5 years. We were supposed to complete 20% blending by 2030. We are now going to be able to do 20% blending by 2025. E20 blended fuel, which was introduced into the market in April of this year, is now retailing at over 5,500 retail stations. And we will get 20% blended fuel. Now, two things. Our consumption is shooting up. As an economy, the more number of people are using energy. I mean, many are shifting, I'm coming to. And to be able to do 20% of whatever is that by 2025, I think is a fairly impressive figure. If you look at the other forms of energy, clean energy, compressed biogas, etc., the number of cars coming onto the market, both in terms of electric vehicles, compressed biogas. Electric vehicles, yes, you could argue that till the grid is not totally green, it's only offering you partial relief in terms of forward movement. But I can say with a degree of confidence, and here I must choose my words very carefully, a lot of people ask me, when will energy prices go through the roof? I mean, they talk about the global turbulence, etc. And to which my answer is that our experience of the last 2-3 years has taught us that the more uncertainty you have in terms of global energy situation, the faster is the rate of transition. In other words, in the year when there was maximum turbulence, the International Energy Agency said that the transition was much faster. We in India have very successfully navigated the three pillars of that trilemma. One is availability. In the last 2-3 years, at no point has there ever been any shortage of energy availability in any part of the country. Even when there were severe floods in the northeast, our oil marketing company people carried the LPG cylinder on their shoulder and delivered it there. Affordability, at a time when in the non-oil producing countries prices went up between 40 and 70%, in India in the last 523 days, because I used the figure 522 yesterday, the prices have actually come down of petrol by 5% and diesel by about 0.2%. Sustainability, so we ensured availability, we ensured affordability, and we also are going strong on green transition. I mentioned the biofuels story. We have now joined other countries in establishing a biofuels alliance. I think the further expansion of urban metro, which is the cleanest form of transport, that plus the last mile connectivity, plus what we are doing on our roads will hopefully, and by the way, one of the OMCs set up a second generation ethanol production facility in Panipat using agricultural waste of parali. That's very important because otherwise the parali will be burnt by the farmer and you have them. So I think we are moving ahead on all the fronts, but I think the real story will come when our metro system will be fully operational. The RRTS will develop way beyond the Delhi-Meerut 82 kilometers or so. You have these other corridors. And when the composition of the support system will not lead to, as Manojji says, concentration at the station, a lot of this thing, I think things will develop, and I see the beginnings of that. Of course, in all that we are doing, these are time context objectives. We are ultimately going to be moving to green hydrogen. That is the fuel of the future. And I think I'll give you an example with RRTS. I am now getting a lot of feedback. There are a lot of people who work in Delhi and who live in, let's say, Meerut or around Meerut. They get up at 6:30 in the morning to come and work in Delhi. And then after doing day's work, they reach back at 10 o'clock. A journey of 3 hours, which could get worse with the consent, will be completed in, 50 minutes or so. That plus the fact that you have more efficient road transport and you will be shifting the fuel. I think it's only a matter of time that you will move to green hydrogen. I know I'm thinking a little ahead, 2030 and above ahead. Green hydrogen lends itself to support in countries which have a large demand, where production can take place and where consumption can also take place. Because by its very nature, a gas does not lend itself to transportation. Yes, there are companies which have done very well. They are into green hydrogen, but they are exporting green ammonia from India to Germany, from India to Singapore, etc. So I think we have got a fascinating situation in overall terms. Urban space is growing. It contributes to 65% of our GDP. That's going to go up with the passage of time. Number of people who will be living in urban areas will increase. I don't know, it would be what, 35% now. Last census was 2011. When we get the next census in a year's time, it should be 33, 34%, if not more. And By the time you reach to 2040 or 2050, and you have to plan on issues like this on a longer term perspective, we would have something like between 600 and 800 million people living in urban spaces. That requires the most efficient urban transport system and the entire ecosystem to be recast. So I think the kind of deliberations you're going to have now, bringing together both the project managers of the different metro systems, people in the ministry and other parts of the government who are associated with this, and also the private sector, our collaborators from outside the country, those who have already partnered. And I can conclude with one comment. I've been a professional diplomat for about 39 years, and I worked 6 years in a related field in New York. I cannot think of any country in the world today, and I say this with confidence, where the kind of economic opportunity that India has to offer right now, because you've got all the coordinates in place for very rapid expansion of urban transport. And I think the challenge is to get it right, not to take the shortcuts, not to do it in a haphazard manner, and demonstrate a totally new and efficient Gati Shakti spirit. And I believe the fact that it took 50 years to produce 45 kilometers between 1972 and December 22 in Kolkata, and it takes 4 years to do that much or more now, shows that we have changed, and we have changed for the better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Your thought-provoking words are a source of inspiration for all of us. You have touched upon the core issues in urban transport and shared some insightful, encouraging, and interesting statistics, which provides guidelines to chalk out the future initiatives in sustainable mobility. To conclude the inaugural session, may I request Shri Vikas Kumar, Managing Director, Delhi Metro Rail Corporation Limited, to propose a formal vote of thanks to the conference.
Shri Hardeep Singh Puri ji, Honorable